generations to come.
Welcome to another edition of the TDN Writers Room podcast. My name is Bill Finley. I'm a correspondent for the Thoroughbred Daily News, also co-host Down the Stretch radio show with Dave Johnson every Saturday on Sirius XM Radio.
Hope everybody had a good Memorial Day holiday. I'm Randy Moss with NBC Sports.
TD Thornton checking in from a little bit north of Boston today. I'm a stablemate of Mr. Finley's over at TDN.
Well, guys, some of the news that was made during the week was really sad news, unfortunately. And let's start with the passing of Christophe Clement at age 59. A little bit later in the show, we're going to play an ad for West Point Thoroughbreds where Terry Finley, West Point, used Christophe Clement as a trainer, put it very eloquently, and I don't think we can even top that. But he used the same words that I'm prepared to use. He was such a gentleman, such a class act. Almost reminded me of, some of the trainers who were still around when I came up early on in the game, like somebody like Woody Stevens or a Mac Miller or someone like that. Just old school, no frills, just got the job done. His numbers are fantastic. He won 2,576 races, 286 graded stakes races. Gio Ponte, he trained in 2009 and 2010. And that horse was champion turf horse in 2009 and 2010, champion older male in 2009. And let's not forget Tonalist, who won the 2014 Belmont, beating California Chrome as he was going to go for the Triple Crown. So just a real gentleman, and the game needs more people like this. It'll be very mixed.
Yeah, really sad. He was just 59 years old. He'd been apparently battling this illness for quite a while. His son, Miguel, who's been taking on more and more responsibilities, especially as Christophe's health issues began to worsen in recent months, is going to take over the reins. And anyone who has had the opportunity to speak to Miguel about horse racing knows that the stable will be in excellent hands. I mean, Clement's record just goes to show you what a trainer can accomplish if they always put the horse first. And in this situation, I mean, I think a lot of people who were maybe not closely involved with the sport, but fans who followed it, I think the news kind of caught them by surprise because the Clement family was extremely private about Christophe's illness. The people that were involved in racing on the backside obviously knew about it. But when we would call at NBC to talk about some of Clement's horses, we would speak to Miguel, and, we would always be requested, to leave that part of it out because, to respect the privacy of Clement and what the family was going through. But yeah, just real heartbreaking news because he was just an unbelievably classy gentleman.
And what struck me about Christophe Clement also, as Bill alluded to, old school horseman, that comes to mind. But sometimes you think of an old school anything and you think set in their ways and have a certain way of doing things. And Christophe Clement, throughout his career, he repeatedly stressed in interviews and profiles of him that you have to be adaptable as a horse trainer. You have to be constantly changing and constantly changing up your ways to meet the needs of the horse and the needs of the times as the game evolves. So he will be missed.
Yeah, I mean, he was very consistent too. His 19% winners for his career. And you just put him down for that 18 to 21% every single year. And he's going to hit the mark. Here's an interesting statistic though. Was he a turf trainer or was he a dirt trainer? Well, he's just a good trainer no matter what. But his excellence on the turf, he won 1,952 races on the turf and 624 on the dirt. Another sad news out last week was the passing of Don Coombs, who was a trainer of Dusk Commander, who won the 1970 Kentucky Derby. I would I would actually imagine that a lot of these people watching the podcast don't know who Don Coombs was or didn't know before the reports came out. And that's part of the story. As old as we three fossils are, I wasn't around for the 1970 Kentucky Derby, but after that, he was 31 years old. He looked like he had his whole career in front of him. And he just never caught on. Only won 326 races in the rest of his career, retired in 1991. And, but to show you a little bit about him, he actually fired the owner of Dusk Commander. You've heard of trainers getting fired. He just apparently, this guy, Mr. Lehman, Robert Lehman, I believe is his name, was a real knucklehead who was really always, telling him what to do. He says, Mr. Lehman knows a lot about the construction business, but I don't think he knows much about horses. Take your horse goodbye. So, which was interesting. Randy, did you ever meet him? I'd never had the pleasure.
Yeah, he was stabled at Oaklawn Park quite often post Dusk Commander, obviously way later than Dusk Commander. So I had a chance to meet him a few times then, and I've often wondered. I never asked him if he ever regretted firing Robert Lehman, because Robert Lehman wound up being one of the best, most successful owners in Kentucky. Right, Run Dusty Run, Smiley Adams trained his horses, and they won all kinds of stakes races in the state of Kentucky. The Lehman colors did. Dusk Commander was a horse that certainly is not going to go down in history as one of the more illustrious Derby winners. He ran in the Hutchison Stakes at Gulfstream. He was 40-1, finished fourth. Then he came back in the Fountain of Youth. He was 62-1. He finished 11th in a 12-horse field. He finished 7th in an allowance race at Keeneland. That was in April. And then he comes back all of a sudden, just boom, boom. He wins an allowance race around 2 turns. Then he wins the Bluegrass at 35-1 on a sloppy track. And that was a key, because when he came back in the Kentucky Derby, then 9 days later, he caught another sloppy track. And it was a big upset win for Dusk Commander there that cemented Don Combs in Kentucky Derby history.
And that win in the Bluegrass was really interesting because, Dusk Commander was a horse who was very small of stature. He was barely 15 hands high. I don't think he topped out more than 900 pounds. Don was an interesting guy in that he was only in, I think, his second or third year of training at the time. And he was also the exercise rider for Dusk Commander, which was a little bit unusual, still is unusual in this day and age to see a trainer who might be an exercise rider of his own Derby horse. At the time, not counting the trainers who won the Derby in the 19th century, Don Combs was the youngest trainer to win a Derby in the 20th century. In the modern era, we say he was 31 years old. And, he did it with an Illinois bred who cost $6,500 as a yearling. At age 2, he ran in $7,500 claiming races, kind of a small, hard-knocking horse. And when he later went to stud, those were the types of horses that he produced. But I was reading a bit before the podcast about Mr. Lehman. I was not familiar with him or as familiar as Randy was. But apparently on the day of the Bluegrass, he was off in another part of the world tiger hunting. That was his passion. And when Dusk Commander went to run in the Derby, he was there, and he brought all sorts of good luck charms, including these tiger bones that were supposedly going to bring him luck. And I guess it worked. Dusk Commander developed a filling in the ankle. There was some pressure about whether or not he should run back in the Preakness. He did run back in the Preakness, and he finished very poorly in that race. I think he was 9th. And Don said, I don't need this pressure. And he walked away from it. So I think a lot of times we try to define trainers by one big win, and there's more to them than just that. So good for him for walking away if the owner was a little too much.
And an interesting trivia question. The original trainer of Dusk Commander, before the horse was transferred to Don Combs, I had no idea until I was reading in Don's obituary. And it doesn't say on the past performances like they do now, the exact point at which the horse changed hands. But the original trainer of Dusk Commander, Billy Turner, way back when, 1969, when Dusk Commander was a 2-year-old, 8 years, obviously, before Seattle Slew.
The TDN Writers Room is brought to you by Keeneland. A pair of Keeneland September graduates brought home the graded glory on Memorial Day. Too Sharp was exactly that in Monday's Grade 3 winning colors stakes at Churchill, going wire to win by 3.5 lengths for her second straight graded stakes win. Then, out at Santa Anita, Skippy Longstocking earned his 9th win at the graded level in the Grade 2 Hollywood Gold Cup. The $15,000 Keeneland grad has now won over $3.6 million. This year's Keeneland September sale takes place from September 8th to the 20th. Make plans to attend. And coming up next on the TDN Writers Room, Frank Mirahmadi joins the show.
It all comes down to this.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen.
The moment that defines the year, when the world's most influential buyers gather, and every decision, every bid, every opportunity shapes the future. At a marketplace that brings the thoroughbred world together, and where futures are forged, because every moment matters. At the World's Yearling Sale, Keeneland, September.
This week's Fastest Horse of the Week is brought to you by track record-setting Nashville, one of the fast sires at WinStar Farm. Any track record is impressive. When it takes place at Keeneland, it's doubly so. And on Breeders' Cup Saturday, the COVID Breeders' Cup, November 7th, 2020, no spectators, Nashville started things off that day in the very first race, the Perryville Stakes, by scorching 6 furlongs in 107.89. Nashville was booked full in his first 2 seasons with 368 mares bred. His first foals are now 2-year-olds that you will see in action this year. WinStar stands Nashville for a fee of $15,000, but you can call now for late season incentives. Sunday, Santa Margarita Stakes at Santa Anita brought us our fastest horse of the week, Seismic Beauty, whose 5-length wire-to-wire Tour de Force earned a buyer's speed figure of 104. Seismic Beauty is a 4-year-old Maryland-bred filly by Uncle Mo, owned by My Racehorse and Peter Lydell, trained by Bob Baffert. She streaked past her 4 to 5 stablemate Splendor in the opening furlong to take command, set a quick pace, and was never seriously threatened as the 8 to 5 second choice. Seismic Beauty, by the way, was coming off a 10-length allowance win going a mile. That allowance win and then the Santa Margarita are the only races in her 6-race career in which she has run around 2 turns. That's obviously the key for our fastest horse of the week, Seismic Beauty.
Welcome in now the Gainesway guest of the week, and is Frank Mirahmadi, the voice of Santa Anita, also the voice of Saratoga, which this year means he will be calling the Belmont Stakes both at the track for the on-track audience and also for Fox. Frank, that's a big, I mean, you've had so many big moments, Breeders' Cup, Santa Anita Derbies, but I believe this is the first time you've ever called a Triple Crown race. Any nerves? Is it extra thrilling? How would you describe the way you're feeling about this?
Well, I'm pleased to tell you that this will be my second one because I called it last year for the first time when we had it at Saratoga.
Oh, that's right. Okay.
And it was an incredible experience and certainly a lot of nerves. And, once the big Fox broadcast starts, there's no question the adrenaline goes to a new level. And the key, and I've learned this over many years, it's almost 30 years now that I'm calling races, with the big races, the most important thing is to trick yourself into pretending it's a starter allowance event, and that, you know these horses. It should theoretically be easier because there's no worry about who they are. You know who they are as a racing fan. And so for me, I think the whole key is to just try to stay calm. And I specifically remember when I called the Arkansas Derby, it was the 4th and final Arkansas Derby. I called in 2015 with American Pharoah when they were coming to the gate. I just was taking deep breaths and I kind of leaned into the glass. I'm like, dude, calm down. Relax and just, use what your idol told you, which is what Trevor Demon said to me. Open your eyes and tell the people what you see. And I think if you keep it simple, then you could get that out of the way and just try to, celebrate the winners.
Well, your powers of description are obviously unlike anybody else's, but try to put into words what the Belmont at Saratoga specifically experience was like last year.
It was incredible, Randy. I mean, I remember, specifically right before the race when Maggie Wolfendale had the microphone and she held it out to the crowd. I mean, I got goosebumps, and it was just one of those moments where I'll never forget the crowd and the reaction from the people, and just understanding the magnitude of this moment, that this was, going to go down in history as the first Belmont Stakes run at Saratoga, and how important it was. And then, at that point, just enjoying that moment, like you work hard in life to try to get to these moments. So you have to try to enjoy them. And if you ask race callers around the country, the hardest and sometimes most miserable days are those big days because there's so much going on and it's hard to enjoy the moment. But, when it came to that race, I just looked out there and a lot of reflection and just thought about it and just said, all right, man, just focus here, keep the blinkers on and give them everything you have. And I was very happy with the way it went. You don't know because it's all adrenaline. When you're talking and you're going, it's just, there's no time to think. There's no editing. You just got to go with it. And if something goes a little bit wrong, which it didn't, thank God, if it does, you got to just keep moving because there's no second take. But it's quite the experience.
Frank, at Saratoga, we know it is a unique and historic venue, but its announcer's booth presents some particular challenges for somebody calling the races up there. Tell us what that's like, please.
It's a very difficult assignment, and the reason it's most difficult is because of how low to the ground the booth is. And Tom Durkin did a cart talk, actually brought to you by Gainesway, in fact, on the shows, and he described that booth better than anybody. Well, when it comes to adjectives, there's no one better. So it's no surprise that Tom described that booth in just the best way. In that it's almost impossible. You're bobbing and weaving. You're low to the ground, which means there's more preparation necessary because you have to learn every nook and cranny. With announcers, we start with the silks and then the equipment and then, of course, the horse. But in this case, you got to look at the sleeves and just every little bit of the cap because when horses are across the course or across the track, you can't see them. And so it's important to be able to have every little thing to identify them with. But there's no excuse. I've been doing it there a couple of years now, and I'm used to it. And you just got to adjust and realize, one thing about Saratoga also, at the end of the race, a lot of things can happen in that last 100 yards. So you got to be careful. You can't declare something over just yet. You see those late rallies on the far outside, and they can catch you off guard. So, and John Embrial, who's one of the classiest people of all time and certainly put me in a position to succeed there at Saratoga, bringing me in to fill in a couple of times before he retired. He gave me some great pointers as to what to pay attention to and what the concerns are and what the dangers are in calling races there when they get to the wire.
Frank, I think all of us on the podcast have the same story. How do we get hooked on racing? My dad took me to the track. And that's what you hear from so many people. And from personal experience, those were just thrilling memories and great times in my life. I understand your story is pretty much identical to that.
100%. Grew up in Beverly Hills, was going to the track at a very, very young age. I don't remember. There's so many people remember the exact day they were there. I have no idea. I do know that we ran the Crystal Water Stakes at Santa Anita very recently, and he's one of the names that I remember earliest on when I was Ancient Title, Crystal Water, and those horses. So, for me, my best memories come right around in the late 70s. 1977, when J.O. Tobin defeated Seattle Slew. We didn't go that day, but I listened on the radio to Harry Henson's call. And so we used to go as a family. I've got a brother and my mom and dad, and we would go often. Probably more to Hollywood Park. Santa Anita was a little further, but we were always there on opening day, always there for the big cap. I can't remember a big cap that I missed as a kid, starting from a very young age. And so we used to go out there, and then I just loved it. And to me, we have great sports in Los Angeles. We got the Dodgers, we got the Lakers, we got the Rams. We had the Rams, and now we have them again. But basically, for me, it was horse racing. I just loved every bit about it. I loved going and getting autographs from the jockeys. I just enjoyed everything about it. And it just became my favorite sport. And every Saturday and Sunday, all I wanted to do is just go to the races. And so we would go, and I just have such vivid recollections of where I was. And I think that's important. I always tell people when they come to the track, try to find a different vantage point to watch big races from, because you'll always remember this later in life. And for me, I remember where I was for so many different big caps and Hollywood Gold Cups and things of that nature. And we just went. And then as a kid, I learned how to imitate voices. And I think part of that came from living next to a gentleman a couple doors down named Dawes Butler. He was the voice of Hanna-Barbera characters, including Huckleberry Hound, Snagglepuss, Elroy Jetson, Captain Crunch. And my brother found his driver's license one day on the street. We lived on Oakhurst Drive. And he knocked on the door and he went and gave, he said, "Sir, I found your driver's license on the ground here." And he met him and he found out, and he went in and he recorded some stuff with my brother. My brother said, "You got to see this." So he took me, and then my brother's 3 years older than me. So at that point, it's a big difference in age. And I went in there and watched this old man leaning into a microphone doing "Heavens to Murgatroyd, this is Snagglepuss." And it was so strange to me. I remember being fascinated by that. And I think I had done some voices before then, but when I try to think about how this started, I think it's just that view of this old man leaning into a microphone, doing Yogi Bear and Boo Boo and all these other characters that I'd been watching. I mean, his Huckleberry Hound, and he made cassette tapes for us, talking to my brother, his girlfriend, and myself. And those are memories that I've just been watching him on cartoons, and now I found out how that worked. And I think that it made me more fascinated with the idea of imitating voices. And since we always went to the track, I started what my buddy Jeff DeForest, a great radio guy in Florida, said to me is one of the most useless talents there is, which is imitating track announcers. I mean, who cares if you could imitate track announcers other than a very small audience? But that's how I got my start in calling races. It's not like I always planned on being a track announcer. I think it was certainly meant to be because it was my interest. But the way that it all happened is such a fluke, and it just proves that sometimes in life things are meant to be.
Frank, the announcer fraternity always seems to work to help the young guys coming up, and it's kind of I've likened it to like being a magician.
Sure.
An established magician isn't going to tell you the tricks or give you a helping hand unless they see you're willing to put the work into it and have some talent for it. So, what would be your advice to those young announcers in the pipeline trying to break through? What can they do?
Find a different career because it's almost impossible to get involved. But don't quit your day job. But I would say that, I've had some young people that have reached out, and you have to practice. I was lucky. The way it happened for me was extremely fluky. I could imitate announcers. Trevor was on vacation. I happened to catch the president of Hollywood Park on the phone. I told him I could do it without any experience, without ever having practiced with binoculars. But to be realistic, you have to practice. You have to be ready. And then you need to go wherever the opportunity presents itself. There was a young guy that I tried to put into a situation, and he didn't want to make a trip to that place. I'm like, okay, good luck. So you've got to be willing to do whatever it takes in order to fulfill and to pursue that dream. And but practice. I've always said this. I believe that what can be done has been done in race calling, and so therefore. Don't try to get too cute. Your audience should not need a thesaurus to try to understand what you're saying during a race. Don't get cute. What can be done has been done. You're not going to out Durkin Tom Durkin. You're not going to be able to paint pictures and create those moments. There are certain people in the world that have done things that aren't going to be duplicated. I grew up under Trevor Denman, Harry Henson, Dave Johnson. These are great guys that those guys just aren't around anymore. I hate to say it, but, I'm part of the fraternity, so I'm taking a jab at all of us. Those legends have done it, and they've set the stage. And so in the end, don't try to, nothing new is going to come up, in my opinion. You're not going to develop some new way of calling a race. It's a pretty, there's a fundamental way to call a race, and it's all about accuracy and then excitement when necessary. Don't create something that isn't happening. Don't try to pretend something is happening that isn't. Keep it simple. And in the end, I think, the track announcer, if you're not hearing too much about them, they're doing a good job. And if in the big race they capture a moment for you and they deliver, then that's great. But day to day, you just don't want to hear, you don't want the track announcer to aggravate you. That's what I would say. To me, don't make people go to the mute button, and you've done a great job. And interestingly, with some of my impersonation calls, I'm sure there were a lot of mute buttons, and I get it. And I don't think I'd want to hear a whole lot of impersonations if I had a bet on the race, particularly the last race of a pick six. I don't know that I'd want to hear Rodney Dangerfield and Jack Buck trying to give me the last 16th of a mile. So I think I've gone from a guy who was like the comedian announcer. I think I'm actually very straightforward now. I'm extremely conservative, and I firmly believe that for track announcers, there's a horse that just won the other day at Santa Anita, which is named after my theme for what every track announcer should do, which is less is more. The great announcers didn't talk too much, and a lot of today's announcers can't stop talking.
Yeah, I was a close friend of the late Terry Wallace, who called races at Oaklawn Park forever. Terry always told me that the key to being a successful race caller was having a good memory, but it was also being able to forget. Is there anything to that?
You know, it's funny. I would hate to ever contradict that legend and one of the kindest people. But I actually, when I meet people, I can't contradict what I tell people. I say that a lot of track announcers talk about this forget thing. I understand conceptually what that means, but I don't necessarily believe it to be 100% true. But the reason he tells that way, and he's trying to explain that you got to try to forget because you're going to see the same silks for different horse names. And I've actually seen great announcers that have actually called the wrong name of a horse in silks because they call a different horse from that barn. I think I may have done it once or twice myself and not known it, but I understand what he means by that. And because it's important to you got to clear your mind in a way. I've never really understood or felt that I've had to just forget because I'm such a fan. It's hard for me to forget anyway because I remember, but I will say this. I might not remember what happened 3 weeks ago, but I'll remember a card from 1985 when I was in high school and it was Big Cap Day at Santa Anita. I'll remember the undercard, seeing a horse like Delmar Dennis running a mile, right? But I might not remember who won a decent stake race from a few months ago. So I do understand, Randy, where he was coming from. And Terry is one of my favorite people of all time. And he was so classy about everything. And I know down deep he wanted me to be the guy to replace him when he was going to be replaced. And we had a very warm relationship. And he was just a great guy. He used to come to Louisiana Downs when I was there as the former voice. And he was Mr. Oaklawn. And he made that job what it is today. And that place, the track announcer at Oaklawn, is one of the most important positions in the state of Arkansas. And I certainly enjoyed and embraced that opportunity for 4 great years.
So, Frank, just for old time's sake, can you give us a race call imitating whomever? Huckleberry Hound or Snaggletooth Squirt, or you just make it up. Give us a 16th of a mile of Frank Mirahmadi doing an imitation. All
right, you got to give me some horses. I mean, Randy's watched some of these. Randy's always the expert of who the fastest horses of all time are. Let's get some good horses that have some tremendous figures.
Let's do the three that are going to run in the big 3 that are going to run in the Belmont: Journalism, Sovereignty, and Baeza.
Heavens to Murgatroyd. I can't believe all 3 of them made it to the starting gate even. What's going to happen? And away they go. Sovereignty in the blue collar is going to come with his run on the grandstand side. And let's see, Umberto Rispoli, they writing all kinds of stories about this guy. Sometimes bad press is better than no press at all. Some of these guys never heard of him, but now they all talking about him. And down the stretch they come. Here comes Baeza. And will the steward be able to be objective if this guy comes and mows him down?
Very good. Very good. And Franco, I got you. I want to ask you a non-racing question because it's also one of the most fascinating things about you. If horse racing is near and dear to your heart, I think I know what is second insofar as near and dear to your heart. What's your story with pizza?
Well, I'm actually one of the fattest vegetarians in North American history. I don't eat meat. I don't eat chicken, and I don't eat fish. I don't eat anything that's walked, talked, or breathed. So I've had very strange eating habits. You've heard of the no-carb diet. Well, you're looking at, a man closer to 300 than 200 pounds, and it's because the all-carb diet is not very healthy, so I do not recommend it to anyone. But as a young kid, I think what happened with me is I never... At about age 10, 11, or 12, where we like grilled cheese, a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, a slice of pizza, I stopped eating meat right around that time. 7th grade was the last time I ate any meat. My mom paid me $20 to try to eat this steak. I took a few pieces. I couldn't take it anymore. And she gave me the 20 anyway. It was an A for effort. Anyway, I just don't like those things. It's not like an animal-based thing. I just was grossed out by meat and fish. Never had Chinese food in my life. Never had seafood in my life. So I love cheese pizza. And actually, I tell people that for me, if it's a car, which I'm in, and sorry I had to turn on the air conditioning because I was starting to schwitz it up a little bit. But if I was a car, the cheese light would be illuminated to warn me like, hey, buddy, you know what I mean? Like, let's be real. And as we know, as Randy mentioned, I went through colon cancer. By the way, that was right after that audition. I didn't get the job at Santa Anita, and then I almost went down for the count a few months later. And I got to give a shout out to Dr. Angelo Chinisi and all my surgeons who saved my life in one of the biggest miracles of all time with stage 3. But anyway, cheese pizza is my favorite food. And so, needless to say, in Los Angeles, we are challenged. But on the East Coast, it's a beautiful thing. And I just love plain cheese pizza, easy on the cheese, ideally. And it's just my favorite food, and it never gets old. It's really scary that, to me, it's almost like a pet. Like you feed a dog the same thing every day. Like, how does this dog keep eating, the whatever it is, Calcan or Top Choice? Like, don't they want some variety? And to me, I get excited. Like, I watch Dave Portnoy's pizza reviews. My mouth waters looking for a cheese slice, and that's it. Simple, no toppings, ever. And certainly, it's amazing how many times you order light cheese and you get extra cheese. I beg people, I say, listen, I want it to be where I'm almost complaining that there's not enough cheese on there, please. And when they do it right, they do it right. And if you're anywhere near Belmont Aqueduct, one of the best slices in the world is called New Park Pizza. It's 5 minutes away. When I was calling it Aqueduct in 2017, 2018, I used to do the early changes, and then it would go to Talking Horses. I would Uber there, get my hat trick, 3 slices of New Park and a Coke, and would be right back in time for the late changes and the card. But the East Coast definitely has the far superior pizza. I do eat pizza every day. I don't recommend it for obvious reasons. And if you do, you might want to exercise a little bit.
I got to write this down. New Park Pizza, cheese pizza, easy on the cheese.
Over there, it's fine. You can eat all the cheese they give you at New Park Pizza. You'll love that place. There are a few by Monmouth Park, too. Reach out, and I'll give you a long list. Federicis in Freehold might be the best pizza. Ralph's, by the way, if you fly into Newark, Ralph's in Nutley, New Jersey, legendary. And I always have to give my man Rico at Rockefeller's on Prospect Avenue in Long Branch near Monmouth Park a shout out. His Sicilian is among the best in the country.
We want to thank Frank Mirahmadi, the announcer for the Belmont Stakes, also for all things Saratoga and Santa Anita, for coming on this week as the Gainesway Guest of the Week. As always, very entertaining, Frank. Have a great Belmont week, and we'll see you up in Saratoga.
Honored to hang out with some very talented individuals on this show today. Thank you, Bill. Thanks, TD, and thank you, Randy.
Frank Mirahmadi, our guest of the week, brought to you by Gainesway, the home of lightning fast Grade 1 winning sprinter Drain the Clock. It's always impressive to win the Woody Stevens Stakes on the Belmont Stakes undercard. That's a big race for breeders. Even more impressive in Drain the Clock's case because he became the first horse ever to defeat champion sprinter Jackie's Warrior in a one-turn race. Drain the Clock also won the Bayshore, the Swale, and physically, he's an imposing presence. Drain the Clock stands at Gainesway for a fee of $10,000. He is a son of McLean's Music. Gainesway, power, passion, performance.
Drain the Clock will win and win by as much as he wants.
Drain the Clock will bound home the winner. Drain the Clock, Jackie's Warrior, Drain the Clock by a head.
$120,000. $100,000 to the back.
PA Bred, I think we've built a brand at this point.
It's excitement at every step.
Roses for Deborah just set a new track record.
On average, for the past decade, Pennsylvania paid over $28 million a year in Breeders' Awards, restricted races, and owner bonuses. Plus, PA Breds shine on the world's biggest stage. Just 3 states have bred more Breeders' Cup winners. Learn more at pabred.com.
The TDN Writers Room brought to you by the Pennsylvania Horse Breeders Association, a.k.a. the PHBA. Congratulations to Deanna Manfredi. She has become the first female president of the PHBA. She's a longtime owner and breeder. She's the owner of the Ascoli Pacino Farm. And Deanna has been a board member of the PHBA since 2016. Big news in the organization. Meanwhile, don't miss the first 2 Pennsylvania bred stakes of the year, the Leafard Stakes and the Alphabet Soup Stakes. That'll take place this Friday, May 30th at Penn National on the Penn Mile undercard. To learn more about Pennsylvania breeding, all things Pennsylvania racing, take a look at the 2025 Stallion and Boarding Farm directory online at pabred.com or give them a call the old-fashioned way, area code 610-444-1050.
Well, the great Preakness controversy, Umberto Rispoli versus Flavien Prat, and who was at fault as journalism and goal-oriented player playing bumper cars in the stretch run of the Preakness. It just won't go away. And as soon as you think you've heard everything, Steve Asmussen went on the Steve Bick's radio show. And usually trainers, they are pretty good about not rocking the boat or not criticizing other people in the industry. But he said, this is a great line. He says, Umberto's got to quit riding him like a rented mule. So read that into what you would like. I then talked to Rispoli myself afterwards, and he was very, he was sort of shaken by this. First of all, he said doesn't think he did anything wrong. Neither do I, but you guys, I know Randy doesn't agree with me. But he said that it was, it was troubled. And matter of fact, he told me this was before Memorial Day, before Monday, that he was going to have a private meeting with Flavien in the jockey's room at Santa Anita because they'd both be there that day. Said it'd be just 2 good friends sitting down and trying to work things out. So, but the Steve Asmussen thing sort of set it on fire again. But on top of that, I want to say also what Steve talked to Steve Asmussen talked to Steve Bick. This I do agree with. He says he blames the rough riding on the lack of attention from the stewards. And he's right about that. This is a perfect example. They had the inquiry up for 20 seconds, 30, a minute maybe at the most. They gave neither rider a days or a suspension. Maybe they didn't deserve one or not. But how they were able to, I hate inquiries that go on for 10 minutes. Like, who wouldn't? But how were they able to assess everything that happened in an inquiry that literally probably was 2 minutes or less? So I think Steve made some good points, but I remain in the Rispoli camp.
Randy, I want to hear your take before I weigh in.
Okay. First, let's talk about the stewards, and then we can get into Rispoli a little bit. The stewards released an official statement Friday afternoon. After reviewing the films and speaking with the riders involved, we, the presiding stewards of the 150th running of the Preakness Stakes, came to the unanimous decision not to take action against Flavien Prat or Umberto Rispoli. Period. Paragraph. That's it. Nothing else. Okay. Should there have been a disqualification? Should there have been a suspension? That's a judgment call. Obviously, if they had suspended or taken action against one of the 2 riders, then there would have been a question about why there wasn't a disqualification if they'd taken action against Rispoli. But I mean, this is a perfect example. And I'm not saying they did anything wrong in their actions, but this is a perfect example of the state of stewarding in the United States. The second leg of the Triple Crown, we get a statement like that, and that's it. Nothing about why. Why did they take no action against either rider? Explain. Explain what your thinking was. A unanimous decision. Okay, good for you. That's great. Now tell us what you saw and what you think and what led you to the decision not to take action against either rider. That's what they do in other countries. Yeah, the state of stewarding don't even get me going on the Churchill Downs situation. But, and I'm not saying they did something wrong by not disqualifying or not suspending or fining either of the two riders. Yeah, the inquiry should have been up there for longer, definitely. But the fans, the participants, everyone is owed more of an explanation by stewards than what we got. And it's not just the Pimlico stewards. This happens freaking everywhere. There needs to be much more transparency from American stewards, especially when you're talking about the Triple Crown. Now, quickly about the ride, Flavien told you, Bill, a lot of the same stuff that we had talked about a week ago. It looked like the journalism was not responding, and that's probably why he went inside.
Randy, you said Flavien, you mean Umberto.
Excuse me, Umberto, right. Was not responding. That's why he went inside instead of going 4 or 5 wide. It looked like he had picked out, Clever again, Asmussen's horse as one of the horses to beat and a horse to follow. And that turned out to be disastrous when the horse backed up into his face. And then he was put into a situation. Other prominent riders, historically prominent riders, have come out and said, when you're on a horse that's a big favorite like that, you don't put yourself in that kind of situation. You get your horse into the clear. That's the most important thing. But what I took exception with the most really was his quote with you. The gap was there, and that's why I took it. That's Reese Bully talking to Thoroughbred Daily News. I didn't see a gap. And a lot of people that watch the blimp view, the drone view, and watch the race didn't see a gap. And I think that's the primary problem that most people have with the ride. And it could be also the fault of Flavien. Flavien may have come over a little more aggressively to try to close the door than he should have. But I didn't see a gap there.
Randy, in the aftermath of the race, your partner Jerry Bailey was pretty critical of Flavien Prat. And again, maybe everybody should take a deep breath before they make any sort of comments. But I respect Jerry Bailey as much as any rider, current or past, anybody. And his opinion was that it was Pratt's fault. Have you talked to Jerry about this since then? Or
Jerry and I talked constantly about it during commercial break. Mm-hmm. And even while Donna Brothers was talking to Umberto on the racetrack, I had a special TV view set up that I can rewind and go back and look at things. And I was looking at the drone shot right away, and I was disagreeing with Jerry when we were on commercial break and when Donna was talking. Jerry's like, well, why don't you say it on the air? Well, I probably should have, but Jerry's a Hall of Fame rider. Jerry has his opinion. I think people are more interested in hearing his opinion about a riding situation than my opinion. But my opinion definitely was that there was no hole there, and that out of desperation, he decided to try to create a hole instead of going around. And that's what led A, to the victory when he got through, and B, to all the bumping and the problems that ensued.
So I'll say this. I think so. We're dealing with 3 issues here. Number 1 is the race itself. Number 2 is the alleged controversy in the aftermath. And number 3 is the stewarding. I would say for the race itself, I was glad to see that the outcome of the Preakness was not touched by the heavy hand of over-adjudication that seems to be prevalent, not just in horse racing, but in a lot of our sports in this day and age. I thought it was a hell of a race. I thought it was an exciting race. And I think whether, it might not be politically correct to say this, and I want this to be taken in the correct context, the danger of horse racing is part of the allure. When you watch downhill ski racers, knowing that they might fall, that's part of the allure, knowing that they're doing something that you and I could never do. And when you watch horses running in a tight pack like that and jockeys taking chances to win a big race, that's something that the normal person can't do. And I liked, I thought the outcome was exciting, and I was glad to see that it was not changed or stepped upon by the stewards. As far as the controversy, it's really, in some respects, only a controversy because we, the media, make it a controversy. I mean, Steve Asmussen is very much entitled to his opinion. Every racing fan out there is very much entitled to their opinions. That's what horse racing is all about, batting back and forth with opinions. But I think the telling line from Umberto Rispoli in Bill's story from last week is that, hey, both Flavien Prat and I, this is Umberto speaking in the story, we don't have reputations as being reckless riders. We're not going out there trying to put each other in danger or fellow riders in danger. And I think more than people realize, the riders police themselves. And if these two guys are going to have a private conversation and exchange words, and it's really none of our business how it comes out. So I think that it's only a controversy to the extent that we're going to fuel it. I do have to say I agree with Randy on the stewarding. I mean, these are the pinnacle races in our sport, the Triple Crown races and the Breeders' Cup. And in the case of the Derby, where they took 6 days to come out with an alleged whipping violation ruling against Junior Alvarado, and then they released that kind of like a Friday news dump by putting up a ruling on a public agency, Kentucky Horse Racing Commission website right before the weekend. I mean, come on, this is the Kentucky Derby. A decision should have come out the next day. There's no racing at Churchill Downs on the Sunday after the Derby. And similarly, there's no racing at Pimlico on the day after the Preakness. I don't know why the stewards needed 6 days to be swayed perhaps by the public opinion that's swirling around out there. I don't think they were spending every waking moment working on that statement that came out on a Friday before a long holiday weekend. We call that in the journalism business, we call that a news dump. It makes it difficult for reporters to ask follow-up questions. So I do agree with Randy that these things need to be adjudicated a little more quickly and in step with the prestige of the races that they're judging.
Well, let's hope. So we had Junior Alvarado in the Derby. We had this going on in the Preakness. Can we have a Belmont Stakes with no controversy and just may the best horse win? We'll obviously be talking about the Belmont a lot more on our next podcast, which will be, we have one more to go between now and the Belmont Stakes. But right now, unless people start to look at the field and say, hey, wait a minute, there's only 6 horses. I'm going to throw so-and-so in there because you never know. But right now, there's only 6 confirmed. I wouldn't even say there's 6 confirmed. So we don't have official confirmation from journalism yet. But Sovereignty, Baeza, Hill Road, Rodriguez, and Heart of Honor. So you're looking at a 5 or 6 horse field for the Belmont. There's no point pointing any fingers at anybody, but I just wonder what happened to the idea that all these horses were going to skip the Preakness so they'd be fresh to run in the Belmont. Where the hell did everybody go?
Go ahead, TD.
And I think one point that's a sub point of what you just said is, how about this notion that California racing is ready to fall off the map into the Pacific Ocean? I mean, 3 of those 5 or 6 horses that are going to show up in the Belmont are California based. I mean, we've got Journalism, Baeza, and Rodriguez, all of them based out at Santa Anita Park. Where are all these East Coast horses? I imagine a few of them will come out of the woodwork. It's the Belmont, it's Saratoga. Certainly there are Triple Crown nominees out there.
Yeah, look, if it was 1.5 miles, I don't know if Rodriguez would be running, but at 1.25 miles, I mean, they wanted to run him in the Kentucky Derby. They couldn't. Their original plan was to run him in the Preakness. They decided against that. So the Belmont Stakes is the spot for Rodriguez. And Heart of Honor's in this country. He's got no place else to run. A dirt horse in Europe, this is the spot for Heart of Honor. Other than that, I mean, I think the reason there's no more Derby horses in the Belmont is that the Kentucky Derby was very conclusive. I thought that the first 3 finishers were clearly, no doubt about it, the best 3-year-olds out there. And I think by a reasonably sizable margin. So to have Sovereignty and Baeza and hopefully Journalism, if all is well with him, back in the starting gate for the Belmont Stakes, will be a fantastic thing for the sport. I mean, I pointed out last week my concerns about Journalism. Historically, horses run more I don't say more poorly. They don't run as well in the Belmont Stakes if they have run previously in the Preakness Stakes or the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness Stakes. That would be my primary concern about journalism, and I think it would be a mistake to run him, but I hope I'm wrong. I would love nothing more than to see journalism lay it down and mix it up in spectacular fashion. It would be fantastic for the sport. And going forward, I think hopefully it may convince trainers that might be on the fence about running in the Derby and coming back in the Preakness and then the Belmont to maybe reevaluate. I don't have much hope about that, but it would be nice if that were the end result.
The TDN Writers Room is brought to you by First TV, the sponsor of the Work of the Week. Rodriguez worked 7 furlongs in 124 4/5 for trainer Bob Baffert on Friday at Santa Anita Park. The winner of the Grade 2 Wood Memorial at Aqueduct, Rodriguez was scratched from the Kentucky Derby due to a bruised hoof. After bypassing the Preakness, he is, quote, ready for a trip to Saratoga, unquote, for the June 7th Belmont Stakes. That's according to co-owner Tom Ryan. And really, at about this time of year, who isn't ready for a trip to Saratoga? But first, coming up next, a recap of the Memorial Day weekend action from Santa Anita.
Be a smarter better with First TV, the best horses, with thousands of exclusive morning workouts. All at your fingertips and delivered right into your inbox. Everything you need to be informed. Be smart. Bet smart. With First TV.
With some of the fullest fields in the country and quality racing year-round, there's never been a better time to reap the rewards of breeding and racing in Kentucky. Purse money in Kentucky is at an all-time high, as is average purse per race, outpacing California, Florida, and New York. Kentucky breds. Breed them, raise them, race them. We all win.
The TDN Writers Room also brought to you by Kentucky Breds. To no one's surprise, it was another successful classic weekend for the Commonwealth. 9 horses ran in the Preakness. Of those 9, 7 were Kentucky Breds. And it was a Kentucky Bred superfecta, journalism, Gosger, Sandman, and goal-oriented. That was the 11th consecutive Preakness Stakes victory, by the way, for Kentucky Breds. Kentucky Breds, breed them, raise them, race them. We all win.
Well, the Memorial Day weekend, no more Met Mile on the Memorial Day. That bugs me. I know how important it is for the Saratoga card, but the Met Mile card on Met Mile Day on Memorial Day at Aqueduct it looked like a Thursday at Prairie Meadows, to be honest with you. So now you're coming into a situation where the racing shifted from east to west. The big races of the weekend were the 3 graded stakes races run Monday at Hollywood Park. And I think the storyline and the headline is Saffie Joseph introduces himself to West Coast racing. He apparently had never run a horse in the West Coast, in California in his life. So what does he do? First of the 3 races, a grade 1 Gamely. He wins with Be Your Best with a beautiful ride by Rod Ortiz. It's one of the few times as a handicapper, you predict something and it works out fine. I picked this horse because I didn't think there was any other speed in the race. It was nice to hear Rod Ortiz say afterwards, yeah, I knew I was the only speed in the race. That's why I took off and beat him then. And then in the Hollywood Gold Cup, Saffie wins again with Skippy Longstockings. And that was showed part of his record in the ad we played earlier. But this has got to be the most well-managed horse in horse racing. I mean, he's not White Aberio. He's not Fierceness. He's not any one of the top 3 or 4 or 5 horses in training. Yet at the end of the day, you look down and he's made $3.6 million, winning 11 races, including 6 graded wins. So Saffie Joseph has certainly shown that he can handle this horse and knows where to put him. Rod Ortiz aboard for both of them. And the Shoemaker Mile, the story was the race was very, very very competitive King of Gosford with a perfectly timed ride by Flavien Prat. No elbows were thrown. Nobody bothered anybody else. And King of Gosford got up in the last jump or so to win the Grade 1 Shoemaker Mile. Randy?
Well, Saffie doesn't run often at all in California. He has previously run in the Breeders' Cup races at Del Mar and Santa Anita. I think one time he sent Be Your Best out last fall for a stakes race, and he sent Drain the Clock once to Del Mar a long time ago for, I think, the Bing Crosby for a stakes race. But his visits to California have been few and far between, as you pointed out. So, I mean, and with Skippy Longstocking, right? I agree. Expertly managed. These are the tracks that Skippy Longstocking has run at in his career. Gulfstream Park, Churchill Downs, Aqueduct, Pimlico, Belmont, Mountaineer, Parks, Tampa, Keeneland, Prairie Meadows, Charlestown, Santa Anita, Oaklawn, Saratoga, and Del Mar. 15 different racetracks in 32 starts. I mean, Saffie has picked out the spots where he thought the horse could best succeed, and the horse has won nearly 1/3, or actually more, slightly more than 1/3 of his races now. I think the big question mark in the Hollywood Gold Cup was the 1.25 mile distance. If you recall, Saffie had bypassed the Breeders' Cup Classic now for 2 years in a row because he felt like the horse was better suited for the Breeders' Cup Dirt Mile than the 1.25 mile. But this was not among the strongest fields for the Hollywood Gold Cup. And so he decided to take a shot, and it was proven to be the right decision.
And his stablemate, Be Your Best, she's working on a similar kind of varied past performance block, because if you look at her cut in the racing form, she won her very first 2 starts back in 2022, racing for a different trainer at that point. But then she went 2 years between then and her next win in November of 24. Since then, she's been on an absolute tear. She's won 4 of her last 5 races, winning stakes at a mile and a 1/16, a 1 3/8, and also 9 furlongs, like we saw over the weekend. This was her first Grade 1 race, and she was in complete command on the front end. But the key for her is needs the firm turf. The other note that I took out of those 3 races, King of Gosford, a horse who apparently is kind of a handful in the morning, according to trainer Phil D'Amato. And really the timing of the move was everything by Flavien Prat in that race, because King of Gosford is a horse who only does just as much as he needs to do to win. And Flavien Prat was about 7 lengths behind at the quarter pole, still almost 5 lengths in arrears in the final furlong, and was just up in time to win it. Nicely done.
The TDN Writers Room brought to you by our friends at West Point Thoroughbreds, and West Point wishes to extend its deepest condolences to the family and to the team of trainer Christophe Clement, one of West Point's go-to trainers over the past decade. Terry Finley said, quote, "Christophe was not only one of the most respected and accomplished trainers in our sport, he was also a true gentleman and family man who embodied integrity, class, and dedication. He will be truly missed."
All the thrills. Fraction of the bills. Experience the power of the partnership. Change your life, make new friends, and compete at the highest level of thoroughbred racing. West Point Thoroughbreds, the gold standard in racing partnerships. Visit westpointtb.com.
So that's a wrap on this week's show. I want to thank my co-host, Randy Moss, and T.D. Thornton. Thank you for filling in for Zoe. Frank Mirahmadi, we want to thank him. He was our Gainesway Guest of the Week. Also, our producers and editors who work so hard behind the scenes and do such a great job. Sue Finley, Katie Petruniak, Anthony LaRocca, and Aaliyah LaRocca. We'll be back next week and talking a lot of Belmont Stakes. Hope you join us then.